Donald Trump intends to use the United States military against American citizens who simply disagree with him. People he calls, quote, the enemy from within. America, this is not a candidate for president who is thinking about how to make your life better. This is someone who is unstable, obsessed with revenge, consumed with grievance, and out for unchecked power. And while we fight to move our nation forward to a brighter future, Donald Trump and his extremist allies will keep trying to pull us backward. We all remember what they did to tear families apart. And now they have pledged to carry out the largest deportation, a mass deportation, in American history. Imagine what that would look like and what that would be. How's that going to happen? Massive raids? Massive detention camps? What are they talking about?
It was delivered before an election in public with specific language about how this administration intended to treat dissent. When a candidate signals that he views fellow citizens as enemies and that he is willing to use military force against them, that is not campaign rhetoric to be discounted. It is a governing philosophy being declared in advance. The question of whether voters took that declaration seriously enough is now one of the most consequential accountability questions in recent American political history, because the behaviors described before the election are the same behaviors now being documented after it.
Kamala Harris was a prophet. Everything that she predicted Donald Trump would do, he has done in less than 18 months. He has started new wars. He has driven up inflation, not just at home, but global inflation as well. He has driven up energy prices. He is spiraling us into the biggest recession that anyone has ever seen since the Great Depression. So tell me, if you voted for Donald Trump, why exactly was it that you could not put the best interest of yourself, your friends, and neighbors above your misogyny and patriarchy? I'll wait for your answer in the comments.
Listen, I've got a serious question for MAGA supporters. If everything happening in the country right now, this war, the economy, the border, foreign policy, inflation, all of it, if it was exactly the same, but Kamala Harris was the president instead of Donald Trump, how would you be reacting? Would you still be defending it, or would you be calling it a disaster? Because the real question is this: are people reacting to the results, or are they reacting to who's in charge? Think about it. Shemaine Don McKay, and this is today's reality check.
Don McKay in the house. Oh my goodness.
The word prophet is a strong one, but the argument behind it is straightforward. Kamala Harris did not make vague predictions about a second Trump term. She made specific ones. She named the policies that would drive up costs. She identified the alliances that would be strained. She described the governing style that would prioritize personal loyalty over institutional accountability. And she warned about military conflict in regions where American foreign policy decisions carry enormous global consequences. What is now being documented across economic data, international news coverage, and the personal financial experiences of millions of Americans is a governing record that tracks closely with what she described. Voting rights carries its own weight. When a leader pursues restrictions on voting access while personally using the very methods he seeks to limit, it reflects the same pattern visible across multiple areas of this administration. Rules and restrictions are applied selectively, intended to shape outcomes rather than ensure fairness. That selective application of principle is not a minor inconsistency. It is a governing philosophy, and one that Harris explicitly warned about when she talked about what unchecked power looks like in practice.
We can't have a woman president. They're too emotional. They'll start a war on their time of the month. Okay, you patron saint of vaginal fucking dryness, why don't you explain this?
Let's talk
your
about
elections in this country. We're like a third world country. Your elections are crooked, and you're crooked, and Meet the Press is crooked, and so is ABC and CBS and CNN.
But Mr. President,
you're one-sided crooked networks. Right? Let's call it quits because I've had enough. Thank you, Dad.
That right there is the garbage, gangrenous glob of fucking dog shit that all of you inbred fucking skid marks said was less emotional than Kamala Harris, losing his goddamn mind at the idea of an interviewer asking for evidence of the bullshit claims of election fraud that he was making. And as soon as that Tropicana fucking troglodyte realized she wasn't just gonna roll over and say, "Yes, sir, Mr. President, you won the 2020 election," he throws a goddamn tantrum, turns the color of a fucking cherry tomato, and ends the interview. Very even-keeled. I'm so glad that this guy is the one that's in charge of the fucking nuclear codes during the war that he started. Every accusation is a goddamn confession, and every last one of you cousin-humping motherfuckers that voted for him because women are too emotional to be president need to get fucked.
If this president is thinking about putting us in a position where we're in a war with Iran, the consequences will be absolutely unacceptable and tragic in terms of the young men and women who are American soldiers.
Kamala Harris was right about everything.
One of the things that is happening now is virtually everything we're seeing right now. Somebody predicted. Everything this Trump administration is doing right now was already foretold. People knew it. And to the nth degree, they're telling you what happened.
Under our present president, you said he would prosecute his political enemies. He would cut Medicaid, Medicare. He would ignore court orders. He would alienate our allies. He would give massive tax cuts to the rich.
Remember what they did to tear families apart. And now they have pledged to carry out the largest deportation, a mass deportation in American history. Imagine what that would look like and what that would be. How's that going to happen? Massive raids? Massive detention camps? What are they talking about?
Another interesting phenomenon is that 92% of black women who voted, 85% of black men who voted for Harris. Also, the largest percentage of white people, college-educated white people, voted the same way. And that is because nobody knows this kind of white dude like black people. We didn't go to school to do it. We didn't have classes to do it. We watched him, and we had grandfathers and fathers and mothers who watched him. This is not new. This is retro. This is all something we've seen before. Different packages, different technology. How is it that black people that had the same voting structure as college-educated white dude? How is it that a dude that went to Harvard voted the same way as a dude who lived on Harvard? It is because there is no greater expert on white dudes like this than black people.
And everything that we go through with this administration, I'm going to keep saying this. Kamala was right. You can disagree if you want, but I'm going to say it again. Kamala was right. The black woman, she was right. Everything that this man is doing, Kamala said it. And I'm also going to say, she really did win. I'm going to say that over and over again. Kamala was right. People did not listen. The book was open, and you skipped through everything that she said and still decided to go the other way.
You know, folks, one of the most frustrating parts about this whole thing in Iran is sitting and watching the timeline and seeing all of the clips resurface of Donald Trump talking and speaking against war, claiming to be the no more wars president, claiming to be the peace president, hearing all the MAGA influencers parrot what he said, and then going back and listening to Kamala Harris and other Democrats and other people and other influencers warn us about what Donald Trump would do. you know, people said we were being hyperbolic. People said we were trying to create hysteria. People said we were just trying to create clickbait. But I don't know about you all. When I was watching the debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I was sitting there saying to myself then, she's 100% right here. She's spot on. This is what's going to happen.
One of the most honest tests of political consistency available. It strips away party loyalty, identity, and personality, and asks something simple. Do you evaluate outcomes based on what they are or based on who produced them? If the answer is the latter, then political judgment is not really about governance at all. It is about tribal affiliation. And tribal affiliation, by definition, cannot hold any leader accountable, because accountability requires the willingness to apply the same standard regardless of which side is in power. The Iran conflict is the clearest example of this test in action. When Kamala Harris warned that military engagement in that region would produce unacceptable consequences for American soldiers and global stability, those warnings were dismissed by the same voices now defending the conflict that followed. The cost of that conflict, measured in lives, in fuel prices, in disrupted supply chains, and in strained alliances, does not change based on who predicted it or who caused it. The outcomes are the outcomes, and the soldiers bearing the cost of those outcomes did not choose which political team to belong to.
Who else agrees that Kamala Harris would have been a better president than Donald Trump? I mean, without a doubt. And that motherfucker even voted by mail. He trying to strip your voting rights away.
Kamala Harris attended Reverend Jesse Jackson's funeral yesterday on Friday, March 6th, and when she took to the stage and got on that mic, she says, "Now, I'm normally not a person that say, 'I told you so.'"
Let me just say, I predicted a lot about what's happening right now. I'm not into saying I told you so, but we did see it coming.
In other words, like she said, she predicted that all of this, what is going on today, it would happen. So are y'all mad because she was right? I know there will probably be some haters and some crazy folks that get in this comment section of this video. Baby, say what you want to say. Think what you want to think. But like she said, or we can say it for her, she told you so, and you didn't listen. So yeah, everything that she said, I know it's hard for you to admit it.
Donald Trump intends to take America backward to the failed policies of the past. He has no intention to grow our middle class. He's only interested in making life better for himself and people like himself. You can see it spelled out in his economic agenda. An agenda that gives trillions of dollars in tax cuts to billionaires and the biggest corporations, while raising taxes on the middle class by almost $4,000 a year, slashing overtime pay, throwing tens of millions of Americans off of health care, and cutting Social Security and Medicare. In sum, his agenda would weaken the economy and hurt working people and the middle class.
Is something that sits at the intersection of history, political memory, and lived experience. The argument being made is not simply that Kamala Harris made accurate predictions. It is that certain communities have always had access to a kind of pattern recognition that comes not from academic study, but from generational experience with the specific type of leadership now in power. When 92% of Black women and 85% of Black men voted for Harris, that was not an expression of blind party loyalty. It was an informed judgment based on a historical record that those communities have been reading and surviving for generations. The predictions that are now being validated, prosecuting political enemies, ignoring court orders, alienating allies, cutting programs that working families depend on, were not difficult to make if you were willing to look honestly at the record that already existed. The difficulty was never in reading the signs. The difficulty was in whether enough people were willing to take those signs seriously when they came from voices that certain segments of the electorate had already decided not to trust. That is the deeper accountability question this moment demands, not just whether the warnings were accurate, which the record now confirms they were, but why those warnings were discounted so heavily and by whom. When the people with the clearest historical view of what was coming were also the people whose judgment was most consistently dismissed, that is not a coincidence. It is a pattern. And it is the same pattern that allowed the conditions we are now living through to be created in the first place. The lesson of this script is not simply that Kamala was right. It is that being right was never enough on its own. Democracy requires more than accurate predictions from credible voices. It requires voters who are willing to hear those voices, weigh the evidence honestly, and make decisions based on what is true rather than on who is saying it. The question worth sitting with is this. Now that the predictions have been validated and the consequences are being felt by everyone, what will it take for those voices to finally be heard before the next crisis rather than only acknowledged after it?